I think the Saudis had cast some spells to change the economy, and I think they know how to do this because of their roots. In 2020, while COVID-19 was killing people and crashing economies, something paradoxical has happened with Saudi oil that many economists described as almost magically impossible. When the pandemic hit, oil prices crashed into the abyss. Nobody was driving, nobody needed fuel. Buyers snapped up cheap Saudi oil, planning to store it themselves and resell it once prices recovered in 2021. Smart move, right? Except in oil sale contracts, there is a clause after approximately 10 months. If buyers cannot physically transport the oil to their own storage, they must either return it or cancel the purchase. So nobody accounted for COVID-19 lasting that long, and because there were no vehicles freely moving, no functional supply, it was essentially impossible to transport the oil anywhere else. The buyers had no choice but to cancel. Saudi Arabia walks away unharmed, still rich, still dominant. It just happened, like a sleight of hand. And isn't the sleight of hand exactly what we call magic? I think the Saudis had cast some spells to change the economy, and I think they know how to do this because of their roots. That is, my theory, but there are others who say something even more interesting. Iraqis said the Saudis were secretly part of a cult, that they were secretly Jewish, that they had a leader who manifests the reality we live in via magical means, and all of this is supposedly supported by top secret Iraqi government files. I personally read through those documents, so you do not have to. I sacrificed myself. Let me take you through what they actually say, okay? And then tell you what I actually think about all of it. So, as you may know, the Saudi kingdom comes from the Saudi dynasty. The Saudis are actually a family. They held military and political power throughout the Middle East for centuries. But in their journey towards becoming a real kingdom, there is one religious figure who is perhaps more powerful than all their military force combined. His name is Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. So this man lived in the 18th century, and his whole goal was to make Islam as original as possible, as close to its roots as possible. No visiting shrines, no innovations, no additions, pure stripped back Islam. He promoted a kind of radical Puritanism, and he held all the religious authority that helped the Saudis become a legitimate kingdom. Without him, there is arguably no Saudi state as we know it, okay? Now, during the Ba'athist period, when the Arab Socialist Ba'ath Party ruled Iraq from 1968 to 2003, Iraqi intelligence compiled and distributed a document remarkably claiming that this same Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, the theological founder of the Saudi Arabia, had family connections to crypto-Jewish networks. The document was top secret at first, then it was declassified. The fact that they made these documents for purely American eyes, partially for American eyes, is also wild on another level, because it makes it seem like, people who would literally execute each other today could have shared common interests not so long ago, which, by the way, is exactly what America eventually did to Saddam Hussein. They led up to his execution on live TV. The document is called The Emergence of Wahhabism, written by an Iraqi intelligence colonel named Saeed Mahmoud Najm al-Amari. It has a few English errors, probably because he wasn't a native speaker in English, but here's what it directly says. The Wahhabi movement is ascribed to Muhammad ibn Abd al-Wahhab ibn Sulaiman, who traces back to Tamimi, whereas Mustafa Tawran states that Muhammad bin Abd al-Wahhab is a descent of a family from the Jews of Dunmah in Turkey. Dunmah were Jews who publicly declared conversion to Islam, both to escape persecution by the Ottoman sultans and, according to some, to subvert Islam from within. Tawran, a genealogist, someone who studies family trees, further claims that Sulaiman, the grandfather of Abd al-Wahhab, whose actual name was allegedly Shulman, was a Jew from the merchants of Bursa, Turkey. I'm from Turkey. I have to say, the guy himself doesn't exactly look like he's from Bursa. He doesn't, look like Salt Bay's cousin or anything, but let's keep going. The Dunmah trace their origins to one very specific and extraordinary figure, Sabbatai Sivi, also from Turkey, from Smyrna, modern-day Izmir. Sabbatai Sivi was deeply invested in practical Kabbalah. To leave the mambo-jumbo behind, it basically means he was very into magic, for lack of a better term, yeah? He was proclaimed the Jewish Messiah in 1666, probably his lucky number. He walked into a bazaar and pronounced the Tetragrammaton, the forbidden name of God, Yahweh, and wasn't struck down, which made him a holy figure in the eyes of his followers, since uttering this name was strictly prohibited. He also prophesied he would overthrow the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed. He obviously couldn't. He was cowed, given two choices, death or conversion to Islam, and he converted. But after that, the idea formed that he and his followers were secretly still practicing their original faith while outwardly being Muslims. Convert and subvert, integrate and change from within, create innovations, project one identity, preserve another. To use more Gen Z language, infiltrating, gaslighting, love bombing, anything. The document doesn't stop at the religious authority of these Saudis. It also targets the political source, the Saud family itself, direct quoting it. Yusuf Hatata, another genealogist, states that bin Saud is not related to any of the famous Arabic houses, neither in pre-Islamic times nor during the Islamic times. Abd al-Wahhab al-Shammari, this is another Abd al-Wahhab, says Muhammad bin Saud is of Jewish descent also, and traces back to the Jewish Mordecai bin Abraham bin Moshi, who was a merchant in al-Basra. He claimed to be one of the local tribes, was extremely generous with them, traveled with them to Najd, where his name became, Arabicized, and Markhan bin Ibrahim bin Mushi. He gathered people around him because of his money and wealth. Now here is my actual opinion. Drum roll. I think it is just propaganda, and it is probably baseless. The reason why Iraq would produce a document like this is very obvious. When, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait in 1990, the Saudis sheltered the Kuwaiti royal family and refused to let Iraq advance further south. Iraq had every political reason to discredit the Saudi dynasty's legitimacy and religious authority in one move. That is exactly what this document tries to do here, okay? To be perfectly honest, I haven't independently verified whether those genealogists actually said what the document claims. I don't even know if some of them, actually exist. I would genuinely love it if someone did proper research on this. But here's the thing, even if this specific Jewish connection is propaganda, something else in this document keeps pointing at something very real, something older, something that doesn't require the Dunmah or crypto-Jewish networks to explain, okay? Here is a point I will repeat across almost all of my videos. Sumeria is the homeland and the base of all magic, or at least of all Abrahamic magic. If you think the Saudis have never had contact with Sumeria or Mesopotamia, you are in for a big surprise, because there is something beautiful called migration routes, okay? Which built a very strong foundation for exactly that contact, or may I say, inheritance. The most notable people who encountered Sumerian culture and absorbed its magical knowledge were Western Semitic peoples, primarily the Arameans and the Chaldeans. The Arameans learned so much from the Sumerians that it is even mentioned in the Torah. Abraham himself married into an Aramean family through this man called Laban the Aramean. The Chaldeans, who followed and built upon Aramean culture, produced the Neoplatonic Chaldean oracles, a foundational text of magical doctrine as well. Now, here is where it gets directly relevant to Saudi Arabia. According to Tabari, a very old and respected Arabian genealogist, the Arameans moved south and founded two tribes in the heart of Arabia, Jadis and Tasm. These tribes settled in a region called Yamama, that is present-day Saudi Arabia. These two tribes are now extinct, but before they disappeared, they left something behind. From the tribe of Jadis came a woman named Zarqa al Yamama. She was an oracle. As her name suggests in Arabic, Zarqa meaning blue, she had blue eyes, possibly a reference to the mystical concept of the evil eye that we keep seeing in Turkish, Arabic, and basically Middle Eastern cultures combined. She could see things from afar. Some accounts say she could even see things that had not yet happened. So that's an oracle. Her power was tied to her eyes, obviously. And it may be a coincidence, probably nothing beyond a surface level observation, but even the sound of the name Tasm resembles the Arabic word for talisman. Back in those days, Arabia was always at war, and during these wars, women and children were generally not killed. the men always got the worst of it. Women were taken and intermarried into conquering tribes. Disgusting past, am I right? But here's the important part. Throughout history and across most of the world, women have been the primary carriers and preservers of mystical ideas and magical traditions. You can even see echoes of this in your own life. These social media witches and such, they are performative. But yes, they were very much real back then. Because Zarqa had such potent power, she became a visible threat to the Himyarite authorities prior to the 7th century AD. The Himyarites, a South Arabian tribe from Yemen, wanted to conquer the Yamama region, and ultimately they did. According to the story, they killed Zarqa al Yamama by gouging out her eyes. These stories get intense, sorry about that, okay? But the Himyarites did not occupy Yamama themselves. They handed it to another tribe to administer as their agents in the region. And the tribe they chose was Banu Hanifa. Banu Hanifa were the ancestors of the Saud family. So it becomes more than likely that the Banu Hanifa intermingled with the women who survived in Yamama. These women observed the culture, the magical ideas, the prophetic tradition that Zarqa presented, the most ancient Aramean inheritance passed down matrilineally preserved through conquest, filtered through generations, arriving eventually at the Saudi family. And there's some modern evidence that this thread did not die. King Fahad, in his later years, was reportedly, well documented, we can say, and this is from a site, in his obsession with the occult. Senior princes and princesses flew on private jets to Morocco seeking powerful magicians and healers. These Moroccan occultists specialized in love, attraction, and binding magic. The royals initially sought personal favors, love, marriage, health, succession, but gradually turned to the same networks for matters of power and fortune. Moroccan magical traditions heavily blend the Sufi mysticism with Kabbalistic and Jewish esoteric influences, which is what Moroccan occultism has been known for since the Andalusian times. And during Fahad's reign, Saudi Arabia experienced massive, seemingly improbable economic expansion and oil dominance despite multiple crises. If Zarqa's oracle craft was used strategically to foresee incoming dangers, then maybe Fahad's use of divination wasn't just about his personal affairs. Maybe the entire economy of the world was subject to this process. Maybe that is what his successors, the emirs, were also continuing afterwards. Which brings us back to the 2020 oil paradox. That sleight of hand that left Saudi Arabia untouched while the rest of the world burned. When you investigate what magic actually is, you see a common, pattern. It is similar to the idea of manifesting something. Certain seemingly unrelated things happen, connect, and conclude in one desired result. There is a saying in this niche of mystical discussion: magic is bending the luck plane, tilting the plane of luck that we all live on. Even if you do not believe in magic personally, you can agree that people who do believe in magic believe it relies on some type of luck, some type of divine organization. That oil story is perhaps the best modern example of the luck plane being tilted. So here is my actual conclusion, and this is the part where I disagree with the Iraqi document most directly. The shared roots here are not Judaic, they are Abrahamic, and they are even deeper than what the Iraqi colonel was pointing at. The reason something feels occult about the Saudis is that they tap into an inherited ancient doctrine, one that predates Islam, predates Judaism, perhaps, as a formal religion, one that goes all the way back to Sumeria in my theory, that helps them manifest their success, whether economic or political, within the reality we live in. Maybe this was exactly what the Iraqi colonel was sensing when he wrote those documents, despite being able to quite put his finger on it, He felt the mystical aura. Also, Abdul Wahab has an irony, knowing the secrets, bending the rules while publicly rejecting magic entirely. Maybe his rejection of all things magical was really about restricting other tribes with mystical heritage from this power, maybe wanting to be the only hand holding this advantage. Who knows? There is also a beautiful irony buried in all of this that I cannot leave unmentioned. Here he is connected to a tradition of magic stretching through Aramean tribes, through Sumeria itself. I don't mean offense to Saudi ideas, I just mean that even if manifestation through prayer is not considered magic in a strict sense, the way its results unfold in the world is quite magical. It is almost God's work, it is theurgical. The reality is always crazier and more complicated than fiction. So it's Said Bora, thanks for listening. If you want to learn more about my research into this spooky corner of history, science, and religion, and I hope you do not hear the dog sound in the background, and like this video, just tickle that like button, catch you outside, and I really hope that you can see I bought 2 different angles of cameras just for y'all, okay? Just for y'all.